subscribe us and like us. Nice! Hi!
In this episode, we will be talking about the Japanese brutality during period of colonization. We have already talked about this, but there are still many stories left.
On our previous episode, we talked about how Japan stole our administration system. But stealing our country is not good enough for Japan.
They started to take away our identity as Korean and needed guidance from Japan.
You'd be curious why Japan did this. It's because of their ambition to dominate all over Asia. Japan needed Korea as geographical strategic point, and also need to use all resources. Then you might wonder what's the connection between erasing identity and war.
Think about this: if Koreans wear Japanese uniform but against Japan, it would be embarrassing. Japan worried about this situation. Also, Japan wanted to use Koreans as much as they can in every possible way.
Japan forced us to visit the Shurin to defy the Japanese emperor. There was opposition from many Koreans and Christians, but Japanese pushed them hard and all Koreans had to listen.
The deification of Japanese emperor and forced visits to the Shurin War aimed for efficient colonial rule to mentally control Koreans and be ready for the next war. Japan was preparing.
Japan made us bow our heads in the direction of the palace where the Japanese emperor was located. It's a campaign to pledge allegiance to the Japanese emperor.
Especially during World War II, this movement reached to the peak. The aim was to make Koreans feel less of themselves and to put Japan in higher position.
They made us to memorize the oaths of imperial subjects. Koreans had to say it everywhere. A pagoda which had the oaths written on was built in the middle of Namsan Mountain to make people to pay their respects.
Police would check Korean randomly to see if they memorized. And if they failed to memorize it, they had to be investigated and fined. Students would have been punished during class. All schools couldn't use Korean nor learn Korean's history. Koreans couldn't even use Korean names. We have to change names into Japanese names.
Japan tried really hard to make Koreans to believe Japan was the better than Korea.
Japan started to make Korean as a base camp. Men, women, students, all the Koreans who could participate in the war had to go to the battlefield.
They made students soldier volunteer institution, but students were often forced to mobilization.
Because all the student soldiers were not professionally trained, they had to be human shields. Young Korean men and women became victims.
During the war, the Japan government made plans to build brothels near the battlefield. This was to encourage the Japanese soldiers from the long military service. The problem was they didn't have enough women.
So Japan tricked young Korean women, recruiting them factory workers, but sent them a brothel. According to victims' testimony, the Japanese military forced prostitution using opium or stimulates torture to control women.
Most of these women were just 12 to 16 years old kids. Some of the people who were arrested by Japan became maruta. These selected people were sent to a special camp where they were experimented till they died. These experiments were inhumane and cruel. Maruta means a log.
Koreans were treated as an experiment material. These are just part of Japanese brutalities. As Korean, we shouldn't forget this even. Japan apologized to the victims.
We hope people around the world would feel and understand what we've been through and give support us.